What is the difference between gentle parenting and permissive parenting? There is some confusion about that, and we're going to talk in this video about how that confusion was created, what gentle parenting is supposed to be, but what's really happening, and then what we can do to be effective in our parenting. Gentle parenting was a term that was coined back in 2007. There was a book written shortly after that in 2015 titled Gentle Parenting, and the author of the book intended for the gentle parenting approach to be seen as a type of parenting where the parent does a lot of listening and understanding, but then also a lot of problem solving practice and coaching so that the child is able to learn to manage themselves and solve their problems. But what really happened because of the movement is people really keyed into this word gentle parenting and this idea of things feeling gentle, and they really loved the idea of understanding a child's feelings and emotions, and so they went really deep into that. I almost wonder if it's one of those classic cases where people start reading a book, they read like the first bit, and then they just don't finish. And then they start saying, I'm doing it because I'm doing chapters 1 through 4 or something like that. But really, they never get to the point where they do the teaching, and they get so consumed with this feeling of like discussing the emotions and fleshing out the feelings and the emotions that they never got to the place where they were actually doing some really good instructive parenting. So even the author of that book said, you know what, I kind of wish I wouldn't have used that term, gentle parenting, because it's really been misleading to people and it's turned into something different on social media than it was really supposed to be. The answer to what's the difference between gentle parenting and permissive parenting is, well, what it was supposed to be was a little bit different than permissive parenting. But what it has turned into because of social media application and the conversations that have been centering around the concept of gentle parenting has actually turned into the same thing. This type of parenting where the child is leading out, specifically their emotions are leading out. Just to explain a little bit what I'm talking about that might have happened with the gentle parenting approaches. So I've written 15 books. This is one of the books. It's called Parenting a House United. And this book has, in the first part of it, it talks about creating a family vision. Well, there was a woman that came up to me at a conference just the other day and said, oh, I love your vision book. And I've really tried to live that vision. And, I've tried to create a vision for my family and tried to get them on the same page, and here's what's going on in our family. She didn't tell me anything about the skills, the structure, how they were problem solving, how she was teaching the children, nothing. She only talked about the vision, and I realized, oh, she's only read, if I'm lucky, maybe the first quarter of the book, maybe only the first 5 chapters of the book. And that's all she's been trying to implement. And so she calls it the vision book because that's one of the things that's talked about in the first 5 chapters of the book. Regardless of how the gentle parenting approach has started, it definitely has morphed into a permissive style of parenting. In fact, I would say that people don't always understand what really makes something permissive parenting versus what makes something a really traditional, strict, a more authoritative type of a parenting. Not authoritarian. That's a different approach altogether. So I actually wrote another book called Popular Parenting Methods. The whole point of this book is to take the main 3 types of parenting and all of their variations and to show you what happens with each of them. It also shows you what you might be doing without even knowing it. You might think you are authoritative, but maybe you're actually permissive on some things. It helps you know where you fall into some certain traps. And you can find this book as well as all of my other books at teachingselfgovernment.com. In this book, it talks about how in permissive parenting, which I actually call modern progressive parenting, that there is this approach where the parent is trying to please the child or even appease the child. So the child is directing everything with their emotions, with their choices, and the parent feels like they're creating independence in the child, but actually the child is pretty much the servant of how they feel, and they're falling into some pretty bad habits. Habits that end up emotionally draining not only themselves, but the entire family unit. It's bad for relationships. It throws the roles in the family on end, and the teaching, correcting, and instructing that a parent needs to do is basically non-existent because the feelings of the child have taken over all of the interactions. So the parent's doing this because they want to be the child's friend, they want to develop a connection with the child, they want to actually please the child or even get the child's approval of their parenting, because they maybe didn't approve of their parents' parenting. Maybe their parent was more of a bully, fear-based, like aggressive type parent, and so they don't want to go in that direction, so they're going to the complete other opposite end of the spectrum and waiting for the child to signal approval, because then they'll know that their child won't hate them like they maybe disapproved of or hated their parents growing up. It's a really interesting pendulum swing that happens throughout history as people try to fix the parenting. What they miss is actually focusing on principle. If you take principle and you root your parenting on that, then something completely different happens. So I have to confess something. I actually have a lot of videos on this channel that have the term gentle parenting in them. And that's because I realized there was a trend going in that direction, and I tried to help steer that in a new direction because I could see that it was going toward permissive, very entitled type of parenting, and I didn't want parents getting stuck in that and really regretting it later. I basically would say, hey, this is the real gentle parenting. So where you actually teach your children the skills that they need for success, you help them take responsibility for themselves, there's an accountability factor, there's definitely some firm boundaries. All of these things would be part of a good parenting approach. And then can you do it with calmness? Do you have to take things personally? No, you don't, right? And so I was able to teach people how to do that. The gentle parenting phrasing is something that I've even used here on this channel to try to help people see that there is a better way to do parenting. But I do have to say that gentle parenting, by and large, has turned into emotional validation parenting, emotional entitlement parenting. And as the parent goes down this road of trying to emotionally validate their child to a degree that it becomes unhealthy, and maybe even to a degree that allows the child to be emotionally controlling of the family dynamic, the parent also starts becoming more emotionally entitled too. Then all of the interactions in the family become about emotions, mental health, all of that kind of stuff, instead of helping the child feel empowered, proactive, strong, so they can move forward and handle their problems in life. There is definitely a balance that needs to be struck between understanding a person's emotions, saying that you get it, and caring about their feelings and maybe what emotional responses they may be choosing to have, and then also pointing them in a direction where they're not going to have the same problem in the future, where they can be more successful, where they can develop the adult skills to actually solve their problems better. That would be the ideal form of parenting. So that's where teaching self-government comes in. The name of this channel is the Teaching Self-Government channel, and that's because I teach parents and children how to govern themselves so that they can communicate calmly and gently with each other, but also be able to firmly follow principles, take responsibility, control themselves, learn how to self-evaluate so that they're not becoming the victim. Oftentimes, the gentle parenting approach creates a victimhood in the family. In fact, parents and children often end up seeing themselves as the emotional victim. But what if there was a healthy and gentle way, a way not to power struggle, argue, beat the children? What if there was a way to do that, but also to be firm, to maintain your role, and to do the teaching? Well, there is. That's what this whole channel is about. In fact, there is a video, I highly recommend going to it next, and it will give you a little bit of an overview of some of the things that you'll find on this channel, as well as in my trainings, books, courses, and things on my website. And that video is called The Not So Known Secret for Parenting Success. So click on the link to that video next. I'll see you there.